All right. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, Text 78. And this verse says, as long as we desire to enjoy sense gratification, we create material activities. When the living entity acts in the material field, he enjoys the senses. And while enjoying the senses, he creates another series of material activities. In this way, the living entity becomes entrapped as a conditioned soul. Let me read that again because these are very important verses. As long as we desire to enjoy sense gratification, we create material activities. When the living entity acts in the material field, he enjoys the senses. And while enjoying the senses, he creates another series of material activities. In this way, the living entity becomes entrapped as a conditioned soul. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. While in the subtle body, we create many plans to enjoy sense gratification. These plans are recorded in the pool, yes, of one's mind as bija. Bija means as seeds, the roots of fruitive activities. In conditional life, the living entity creates a series of bodies, one after another. And this is called karma bandhana. So the karma bandhana means the entanglements of karma. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 3.9, Yajnartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. If we act only for the satisfaction of Vishnu, there is no bondage due to material activities. But if we act otherwise, we become entrapped by one material activity after another. Under these circumstances, it is to be supposed that by thinking, feeling, and willing, we are creating a series of fruitive material bodies.
Future.
We are creating a series of future material bodies. In the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Anadi Karma Phale Padi Bhavanar Bhavavarnabhav Jale, the living entity falls into the ocean of karma bandhana, the entanglement of karma, as a result of past material activities. Instead of plugging oneself into the ocean of material activity, plunging oneself into the ocean of material activity, one should accept material activity only to maintain the body and soul together. The rest of one's time should be devoted to engaging in transcendental loving service of the Lord. In this way, one can attain relief from the actions of material activity. Okay, well, that's good advice. And obviously, these verses are trying to help us sense gratification, gratifiers, become free from the causes of entanglement that keeps us in the process of sense gratification and in the merry-go-round of material desires and going from one body to another and not making any tangible spiritual progress. Text 79. You should always know that the cosmic manifestation is created, maintained, and annihilated by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, everything within this cosmic manifestation is under the control of the Lord. To be enlightened by this perfect knowledge, one should always engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. Well, that same statement here, especially to be enlightened by this perfect knowledge, one should always engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord, is repeated over and over again, meaning it is the most important statements for making spiritual advancement. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Self-realization, understanding oneself as Brahman or spirit soul, it is very difficult in the material condition. However, if we accept the devotional service of the Lord will gradually reveal himself. In this way, the progressive devotee will gradually realize his spiritual position. Well, what does it mean? Progressive devotee. He's making little by little spiritual advancement by following the regulative principles, by chanting and dancing, and also regularly hearing every day the devotees who are experienced in Krishna consciousness and who give serious lectures on Bhagavad Gita. So there is a regular, let's say, culture of hearing and chanting Krishna consciousness. We cannot see anything in the darkness of night, not even our own selves. But when there is sunshine, we can see not only the sun, but everything within the world as well. Lord Krishna explains in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita 7.1. Maya Shakta Manakpartha Yogam Yunjan Padashraya Asamsayam Samagram Mam Yata Gyasyasi Tatshrinu. Now hear, O son of Prita, Arjuna, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Well, that's wonderful. We should be free from all doubts about Krishna and Krishna consciousness and make steady, progressive, steady, progressive Krishna conscious activities so that we will become qualified to go back to Godhead. When we engage ourselves in the devotional service of the Lord to become Krishna conscious, we understand not only Krishna, but everything related to Krishna. That means everything. In other words, through Krishna consciousness, we can understand not only Krishna and the cosmic manifestation, but also our constitutional position. Okay, what does it mean by constitutional position? we understand who we actually are. We are the eternal servant of Krishna, or God. That's who we really are. We're not Mr. So-and-so or Madame so-and-so. We are the eternal servants of God. That's our real identity. And it's not just God, something that is generic. No, we are the eternal servants of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Krishna consciousness, we can understand that the entire material creation is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's true. But today you have all these so-called big pundits, mundane pundits, that say, well, the world started 3.5 million years ago. And we don't really know how it started, but it started. But once it started, then we know a lot of things about nature. They don't learn anything about nature. They're just confused from birth, death, old age, and disease. They haven't solved any of the real problems of life, although they've made such great strides of advancement in mundane activities, building big skyscrapers. They get bigger and bigger, higher and higher, but they haven't stopped the process of birth, death, old age, and disease, which means that they have not really learned anything. They know how to engage in illicit sex. They know how to make atom bombs. They know how to do all kinds of sense gratification, but they do not know how to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. So therefore, all the advancement they have made is actually bogus. They haven't really advanced at all. Because the real advancement in spiritual life is to know how to go back to Godhead. So we can say that the karmis or materialistic people haven't made any real tangible progress. It's like in a merry-go-round that's always going around and around and not going straight forward towards some specific destination. So the merry-go-round of mundane happiness, mundane knowledge, is not really leading anyone to tangible and spiritual knowledge and spiritual achievement. So it says here, in Krishna consciousness, we can understand that the entire material creation is created by the Supreme Personality of God, maintained by Him, annihilated by Him, and absorbed by Him. We are also part and parcel of the Lord. Okay, well, that in that one sentence gives a clear understanding of where we're situated and who we are and what we're meant to do in life. Everything is under the control of the Lord, and therefore our only duty is to surrender unto the Supreme, meaning Krishna, and engage in His transcendental loving service. Okay, again, a all-encompassing statement of what we should be doing as living entities. What is the goal of the life of a living entity? And if we want to have a successful life, then we have to understand, one, everything is under the control of the Lord. And therefore, our only duty in life is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality Godhead and engage in His transcendental loving service. That is the ultimate purpose of life. And that is what is called real education, as opposed to junk so-called education. Everything is under the control of the Lord, and therefore our only duty is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in his transcendental loving service. Text 80. The great sage Maitreya continued, the supreme devotee, the great Saint Narada, thus explained to King Parsinabharti the constitutional position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. After giving an invitation to the king, Narada Muni left to return to Siddha Loka. So Narada Muni is inviting the king, please now take everything I've said to you seriously so you can come back to Godhead, where I am and where all the liberated souls are. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Siddha Loka and Brahma Loka are both within the same planetary system. Brahma Loka is understood to be the highest planet within this universe. Siddha Loka is considered to be one of the satellites of Brahma Loka. The inhabitants of Siddha Loka have all the powers of yogic mysticism. From this verse, it appears that the great sage Narada is an inhabitant of Siddha Loka. Although he travels all over the planetary systems, all the residents of Siddha Loka are spacemen. I like that. They're all spacemen, and they can travel in space without mechanical help. Yeah. The residents of Siddha Loka can go from one planet to another individually by virtue of their yogic perfection. After giving instructions to the great king Parsinabharti, Narada Muni departed and also invited him to Siddha Loka. Yeah. Well, he's saying, okay, my dear king, I'm inviting you to come back to Siddha Loka and be with transcendental persons. But kings, it's hard for them to give up all their sense gratification. Very hard, almost impossible. But Narada Muni is enticing the king Parsinabharti to give up everything by understanding his constitutional position, by understanding the constitutional position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. So when it says constitutional position, it's a very major statement. We've discussed that before, but just to refresh our mind, it means who we actually are. We are made in the image of God. And that means that we should engage in the service of God or Krishna. That's our constitutional position. We're not meant to do this or do that. Go to the moon. Complete waste of time and money. And you don't even really go there. Or conquer a great number of cities and towns and organize things for better sense gratification. That's a waste of time. or be very famous poet, or be a famous this or that. They're all waste of time. So here it says, in the presence of his ministers, the saintly king Parsinabarhi left orders for his sons to protect the citizens. He then left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapila Shrama. Okay, well, he's doing the right thing. He's not dying with his boots on, as they say. He's giving up sense gratification and now handing over the kingdom to his sons and telling them, well, you take care of everything. Now I'm going to make hopefully spiritual advancement and free myself from the cycle of birth and death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word praja sarga is very important in this verse. When the saintly king, Prasanabharhi, was induced by the great sage Narada to leave home and take to the devotional service of the Lord, his sons had not yet returned from their austerities in the water. However, he did not wait for their return, but simply left messages to the effect that his sons were to protect the mass of citizens. According to Vira Raghava Acharya, such protection means organizing the citizens into the specific divisions of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. It was the responsibility of the royal order to see that the citizens were following the regulative principles of the 4 varnas, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, and the ashramas, namely Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. All right, a very important statement. It is very difficult to rule citizens in a kingdom without organizing the Varnashram Dharma. Well, one second. To rule the mass of citizens in a state and keep them in a complete progressive order. It's a very important statement. In a complete progressive order is not possible simply by passing laws every year in a legislative assembly. The Varnashram Dharma is essential in a good government. One class of men, the Brahmanas, must be intelligent and Brahmanically qualified. Another class must be trained in administrative work, the Kshatriyas. Another in mercantile business, Vaishyas. And another simply in labor, Sudras. Well, today, we don't really have a class of men who are bona fide Brahmanas and who are intelligent and Brahmanically qualified. There are, however, Kshatriyas today and Vaishyas and Sudras, but there are virtually no real class trained for to be Brahmanas. That training is not given in school. in schools in the world today. It's given in Krishna consciousness, but not in the institutions that are supposed to be in training young men and women to become brahmanas. Well, women don't exactly become brahmanas, but they become qualified to be bona fide mothers and raise children properly in Krishna consciousness, which is absolutely necessary to have a good spiritual world. These four classes of men are already there according to nature. But it is the government's duty to see that all four of these classes follow the principles of their varnas methodically. Well, there's no organization today trying to make sure that people are following their varnas methodically. This is called abhirakshana, or protection. It is significant that when Maharaj Parsinabhai was convinced of the goal of life through the instructions of Narada, well, that's what a real guru teaches. And he teaches what is the real goal of life. So it is significant that when Maharaj Parsinabhai was convinced of the goal of life through the instructions of Narada, he did not wait even a moment to see his sons return, but left immediately. Well, today that's not happening. People die with their boots on, meaning they can never leave their position. And they're so attached to mundane sense gratification. And they die not having engaged in the proper process to go back to Godhead. There were many things to be done upon the return of his sons, but he simply left them a message. He knew what his prime duty was. See, that's a very nice statement. He knew what his real duty was. He simply left instructions for his sons and went off for the purpose of spiritual advancement. That's what every person should do in life. They should not stay eternally or all the time eating, sleeping, mating, and defending and engaging in mundane activities. They should give it all mundane activities up in life up and take uniquely to the process of spiritual advancement. Material advancement is there, yes, but making spiritual advancement is very rarely achieved in this age of Kali Yuga, which means that most people are failures in life, even though they might have a lot of money, but they're actually failures because they're attached to meat eating, intoxication, and illicit sex, and making money and spending money and so forth. So he simply left instructions for his sons and went off for the purpose of spiritual advancement. This is the system of Vedic civilization. Sridhar Swami informs us that Kapilashvara is located at the confluence of the Ganges and the Bay of Bengal. Okay, now we know where the place is, where great sages have made their transcendental activities to go back to Godhead. A place known as Ganga Sagara This place is still famous as a place of pilgrimage, and many millions of people gather there every year on the day of Makara Sankranti and take bath. It is called Kapileshwara because of Lord Kapila's living there to perform his austerities and penances. Lord Kapila propounded the Sankhya system of philosophy. Okay. The Sankhya literally means counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And knowing the way material nature is acting. And once you know that, then you do not get entangled in the, let's say, uh, in the misunderstood activities of material activities. So therefore, the Sankhya system of philosophy is helping a person understand how material nature is acting and how to avoid the downward spiral of material life. Text 82. Having undergone austerities and penances at Kapileshwara, King Prasanabharti attained full liberation from all material designations. Well, that's a major, major achievement. He constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and attained a spiritual position qualitatively equal to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You cannot achieve such a advancement in spiritual life if you're always engaged in pounds and pences, as they say. You have to give it up. You have to give up that type of life, pounds and pences, and take up the life of tapasya. And actually, you become happy because you're no longer under the, let's say, under the dictation of the desire for sense gratification. You've given it up completely and are always engaged in the service of the Lord. Now you are actually making tangible progress to go back to Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There is special significance in the words Tat Samyatam Agat. The king attained the position of possessing the same status or the same form as that of the Lord, meaning Krishna. This definitely proves that the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is always a person. In his impersonal feature, he is the rays of his transcendental body. That's nice. Yeah, so that means that you are emitting transcendental rays of Krishna consciousness. When a living entity attains spiritual perfection, he also attains the same type of body known as Sat Chid Ananda Vigraha. Eternal, knowledgeable, and happy form of life, a form of body and life. This spiritual body never mixes with the material elements. Okay, now it's definitely defining what it means to be Satchit Ananda Vigraha. Vigraha means the form of what? Of eternity, knowledge, and transcendental bliss. Although in conditional life, the living entity is surrounded by material elements, earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and ego, he remains always aloof from them. Okay, that is real spiritual progress. You have to be engaged in activities in the material world. But one who is Krishna conscious remains aloof from the mundane aspects of material life and is always dedicated to the spiritual activities of Sanatana Dharma, meaning the eternal functioning of the real purpose of life, which is to go back to God. In other words, the living entity can be liberated from the material condition at any moment, provided that he wishes to do so. The material environment is called Maya. According to Krishna, Daivihi esa gunamayi mamamaya durateya mam eva ye prapadyante mayame tam tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Okay, that's the formula for a successful life in the material world. What is the sign of one having a successful life in the material world? The fact that they are liberated from the attachments in the material world that hold them back from becoming fully engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. As soon as the living entity engages in transcendental loving service of the Lord, he immediately attains freedom from all material conditions. Sagunan samatityayitam brahmabhuyaya kalpate. In the material state, the living entity is in the Jiva Bhuta platform. So Jiva means the soul, and Bhuta means entanglement. But when he renders devotional service to the Lord, he is elevated to the Brahma Bhuta platform, the spiritual platform of Krishna consciousness. On the Brahma Bhuta platform, the living entity is liberated from material bondage, and he engages in the service of the Lord. In this verse, the word dhira, or sometimes read as vira, actually, there's not very much difference. The word dhira means sober, and vira means hero. That means that you become actually correctly cognizant of what the purpose of life is when you are a dhira, completely sober and not anymore a hodgepodge person that's going here and there looking for sense gratification and never really achieving any spiritual advancement. One who is struggling against Maya is a hero, and one who is sober enough to understand his position is a dhira, a renounced person. Without becoming sober or heroic, one cannot attain spiritual salvation. Yeah. You become heroic because you have given up all sense gratification and you have control of your mind and senses, always focused on Krishna consciousness. That's a very exalted position of the living entity. And the goal of such a living entity is spiritual salvation, becoming liberated by your activities of Krishna consciousness. Text 83. My dear Vidura, one who hears this narration concerning the understanding of the living entity's spiritual existence, as described by the great sage Narada, or who relates it to others, will be liberated from the bodily conception of life. Now, this is a very significant statement. Why? Because modern education is not teaching young children or young adults to be liberated from the bodily conception of life. If anything, it's indoctrinating children to be always in the material world and always under the, let's say, the thumb of sex life, or under the under the influence of sex life, so that they never really make spiritual advancement. Purport: this material creation is the spirit soul's dream. Actually, all existence in the material world is a dream of Mahavishnu. And the Brahma Samhita describes, Ya Karanarva Jale Vajati Sma Yoga Nidram Ananta Jagat Anda Saroma Kupa. This material world is created by the dreaming of Mahavishnu. The real, factual platform is the spiritual world. But when the spirit soul wants to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in other words, when a person wants to be God, he is put into the dreamland of material creation. Yeah, he can create so many things. It's just like when the kids go to the seashore, they build sand castles, right? And then they leave, they build a really big sand castle, and they spend a whole day wasting their time doing it. But when they come back the next day, the sand castle is not there. The high tide comes and wipes it out completely. All that work that they did is basically a waste of time. After being in contact with the material modes of nature, the living entity develops the subtle and gross bodies. When the living entity is fortunate enough to associate with Sri Narada Muni or his servants, the Vaishnavas, he is liberated from the dreamland of material creation and the bodily conception of life. So this is a very profound statement. The dreamland of material creation. So whatever you create in the material world is not permanent. And it's exactly like building a sandcastle at the seashore. So you spend the whole day making a sandcastle. And the next day when you come back, it's not there anymore. It got watered down by the high tide.
I think in another purport, Prabhupada gives the same thing to say that even though you build that sand castle, at the end of the day, you go back to your actual home and live. It's only during the day you build that castle. And then at the end of the day, the father takes the children away back to the actual home. So in the same way...
Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending.
No, in the sense, like at least that's the analogy Prabhupada gives, saying that, okay, in the same way, we're building all these castles in the material world, but we have to go back to our original home.
Well, wait a minute. Is that the bona fide home or the home of mundane life?
No, he gives the analogy that right now also, as children play in the, near the beach and then build sand castles, But at the end of the day, the father pulls the children away to their current actual home.
Yeah.
In the same way, the Lord also wants us to use this material world as like we might be building sand castles in this world of building skyscrapers, whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of our life, we should be going back to our.
We want to go back to God.
Godhead. Yes. Yeah. The analogy he gives.
Harivilas. Thank you. Text 84. This narration, spoken by the great sage Narada, is full of the transcendental fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, this narration, when described, certainly sanctifies this material world. It purifies the heart of the living entity and helps him attain his spiritual identity. Well, let's discuss what is the spiritual identity. Well, it's not the mundane body. It's the soul. That's who we really are. We're not the body. The biggest mistake everybody makes is, I am this body. The correct understanding of who we are is, I am an eternal soul, and I am the eternal soul that is meant to serve Krishna with love and devotion. Then you will receive your spiritual body with that understanding. But as long as you identify with the material body, you'll never understand who you are, and you'll always be on the merry-go-round of birth, death, old age, and disease, going around and around and going nowhere. Okay, so one who relates this transcendental narration will be liberated from all material bondage and will no longer have to wander within the material world. So we're hearing this history spoken by Narada Muni of King Parsanabharti to educate us what not to do. So there's two types of education. One education is what you should not do, and the other education is what you should do. You have to learn both. If you only understand what you should do, but never understand what you should not do, you can very easily get entangled in material life. But if you know what not to do, it's like a snake. When you come in contact with a snake and you're educated, you know not to go near it. You don't go into contact with a snake. It's something that you should stay away from. So when one is educated in spiritual life, they know what things they should not associate with, and they learn what those things or people that they should associate with. That means they're educated. But when someone is not educated, they can go and associate with nonsense people and become completely contaminated and completely aloof from any ability to make tangible spiritual advancement, and spend their whole life in mundane knowledge and mundane activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As indicated in verse 79, Narada Muni advised King Parsanabharti to take to devotional service rather than waste time performing ritualistic ceremonies and fruitive activities. The vivid descriptions of the subtle and gross bodies in this chapter are most scientific, and because they are given by the great sage Narada, they are authoritative because these narrations are full of the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They constitute the most effective process for the purification of the mind. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirmed Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Now let us purify this mind and body. The more we talk of Krishna, think of Krishna, and preach for Krishna, the more we become purified. The more we talk of Krishna, think of Krishna, and preach for Krishna, the more we become purified. And by the way, that's very profound because it is a fact when a devotee has the opportunity to preach to another person or to a whole assembly of people, not only he or she becomes purified, but they become happy, right? When you're teaching people to be Krishna conscious, you actually become happy because you know this is real. This is the real purpose of life, is to educate yourself and then share that spiritual education with others. This means we no longer have to accept a hallucinatory, gross, and subtle body, but instead attain our spiritual body, our spiritual identity. One who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge is delivered from the ocean of nescience or ignorance. The word paramestiam is very significant in this connection. Paramestiam is also called Brahmaloka. It is the planet on which Lord Brahma lives. The inhabitants of Brahmaloka always discuss such narrations so that after the annihilation of the material world, they can be directly transferred to the spiritual world. One who is transferred to the spiritual world does not have to go up and down within this material world. Sometimes spiritual activities are also called paramestiam. Yeah, in other words, Krishna conscious activities and thoughts and engagements, and completely staying away from mundane activities and mundane philosophies and mundane engagements. Text 85. The allegory of King Puranjan. In other words, a story that is not factual, but is educating one in a certain way. So the allegory of King Puranjan, described herein according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Well, that's something that nobody understands anymore. They don't understand life after death. They think death is the end of life. This is what children learn in school. You only live once, and when you die, there's nothing. That's what they learn in school. It's completely false. But here it's saying that if one can understand the purpose of this allegory, in other words, the story of King Puranjan, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. That means there is life after death. And death is not the end of life. That's real knowledge. But the karmis, the materialists, they spend a lot of money buying a casket. There are stores. You can go downtown Seattle. I know I've been there, and there is a store that sells caskets. And you'll always find older people looking in the window and pointing their finger here or there and saying, well, I want to be in this one. Yeah, it's just like you go to buy a new car.
Interest.
Right. They also people go to buy a casket, and some of those caskets are sometimes hundreds and thousands of dollars, right? And they want it to be padded and lush and cozy in their caskets, and they can spend up to $10,000 or more for some caskets. You know, just see how they waste their life. That's why we in Krishna consciousness we burn the body so that after death there's no more attachment to the body. So the body is cremated. So it's not there anymore completely. On the other hand, saintly people, we don't burn the body. We put the body in the ground and protect it with salt. Put a lot of salt all around it so the insects and other ground creatures don't eat it, and protect the body because it's a saintly body that was always engaged in Krishna consciousness. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration, the narration or the allegorical narration of King Puranjana. Purport. The word striya means along with the wife, is significant. The male and female living together constitute the sum and substance of material existence. The attraction between male and female in this material world is very strong. In all species of life, the attraction between male and female is the basic principle of existence. The same principle of intermingling is also in human society, but is in a regulative form. Yeah, in human society, not the animal society, but in human society, everything is regulated, right? Go to sleep at a certain time, wake up at a certain time, chant your rounds at a certain time, and so forth. Everything is regulated. Material existence means living together as male and female and being attracted to one another. That's material existence. Spiritual existence is living together, male and female, but being attracted by Krishna and engaging in Krishna's service. That's spiritual life. And material life is being attracted, male and female, by one another and completely forgetting about Krishna. However, when one fully understands spiritual life, his attraction for the opposite sex is completely vanquished. By such attraction, one becomes overly attached to this material world. It is a hard knot within the heart. Pumsa striya maituni bhavam etam tayor mito hridaya grantim ahu. Aso griha chetra sudapta vitar janasya mohoyam aham mameti. Well, one time I was on a morning walk with Prabhupada and he quoted this verse. Aho griha chetra sudapta vitar janasya moho yam hamameti. Everyone comes to this material world attracted to sense gratification. And the hard knot of sense gratification is the attraction between male and female. By this attraction, one becomes overly attached to the material world in terms of griha chetra sudapta vita. Well, this is like going to Costco. You go to Costco, you become completely bewildered by all the nonsense things that they're selling. Someone will say, "What do you mean nonsense? What, are you crazy or what?" But actually, you'll go to Costco to buy some bananas, and you end up buying a television, a new bed, a new this, and a new that. So therefore, Costco is a place of Maya. People think that what they're buying is absolutely necessary, but it all ends up in a junk pile over time. So it wasn't that necessary. Instead of getting a very expensive bed, you can just sleep on the floor, right? Instead of buying a pillow, you can sleep on your arm, right? But no, people want all the so-called amenities of mundane life. And basically, it's a waste of money and a waste of life and endeavor. Okay, so it says, and we'll end with this. By this, everyone comes to this material world attracted to sense gratification. And the hard knot of sense gratification is the attraction between male and female. By Guriha Chetra Sudapta Vita, that is, home, land, children, friends, money, and so forth. Thus, one becomes entangled in the bodily conception of I and mine. I, and mine. That's material life, Just like the politician, they'll say, and I will do this, and I will do that, and I will give you this, and I'll take care of that. So it's all I. And the normal person, let's say not normal, but the mundane person will say, everything is mine. Mine. So the politician is I. And the person completely bewildered by material nature says, mine. However, if one understands the story of King Puranjana and understands how, by sexual attraction, Puranjana became a female in his next life, one will also understand the process of transmigration. Okay. Special note. Oh, this is good. Prabhupada doesn't always write a special note. It's only when there's something of utmost importance does he put a special note after the purport. According to Vijayadvaja Tirtha, who belongs to the Madhva Sampradaya, the first two of the following verses appear after verse 45 of this chapter, and the remaining two verses appear after verse 79. Okay, special note. According to Vijayadvaja Tirtha, who belongs to the Madhva Sampradaya, the first two of the following verses appear after verse 45 of this chapter, and the remaining two verses appear after verse 79. Okay. All right, well, we'll stop right there so we can contemplate what are these first two of the following verses. And also the remaining two verses that will appear after verse 79. Haribo. So that means that there are 85 verses in this point in the text and chant at chapter 29, Canto 4, chapter 29. But there are some extra verses that have, let's say, the summary explanation of what has been said in the 85 verses of chapter 29, Canto 4, chapter 29. So we will begin with those verses tomorrow. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Are there any questions anyone might have or comments? Any questions or comments of what we heard today?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribo. Yes.
It's a comment, Maharaj. I was reading some article yesterday where this is about what people in the material world think for what happens after death. There's a famous businessman in India who died recently, and his sister wrote something. Apparently, they didn't speak to each other for the last 4 years because of some ego issue, and she was feeling very sad now that he's gone. And she wrote that now that he died, he actually went back to his dad, and now they are together. And she thinks when she also dies, she'll also reach them and they'll all be together again. And a lot of people online are like getting a lot of hope from that message.
Well, that message is illusory.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is they have a mundane family in the material world, and they'll attain a mundane family after they die.
Yeah.
But that's completely will of the wisp.
Yeah. A lot of people think like that, Maharaj, at least in the middle. They'll think, okay, they feel sad about the separation when somebody dies, but they think when they die, they'll all go to heaven and they'll be together again.
Right. Well, let's. There's some truth to that. They're going to go somewhere, but it might be heaven. It might be hell, depending on what they did during their life on this earth. Yeah, there was this one man, and he was a preacher, and he was trying to scare people to become devotees. So there was this he was preaching, and one gentleman came.
And weakness too.
What's that?
No, that was crosstalk.
Yeah, and he was preaching, and one gentleman was listening to him, and he said that people who are sinful will go to hell. And the other man said, "But what do you mean by hell?" He says, "No, you go to a place where it's dark and it's cold, and you are always disturbed by the conditions that you're living in." So this guy happened to be a coal miner, and he said, "Well, what's wrong with that?" He said, "Every day I go into the coal mine, and it's cold, and it's dark, but I earn my living by doing that, you know." And then the other man said, "Well, but there are no in hell. There are no newspapers." He said, "What? There are no newspapers?" "No, I don't want to go to hell." Because they buy the newspaper every day to read all the nonsense in the world. Okay, so thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And our takeaway today is one who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge. What is that? Well, what's being explained by Narada Muni to King Parsanabhati, about King Parsanabhati. So one who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge is delivered from the ocean of ignorance. The word paramesthyan is very significant in this connection. Paramesthyan is also called Brahmaloka. It is the planet on which Lord Brahma lives. The inhabitants of Brahmaloka always discuss such narrations, such as what Narada Muni is narrating. So that after the annihilation of the material body, annihilation of material world, they be directly transferred to the spiritual world. One who is transferred to the spiritual world does not have to go up and down within this material world. Sometimes spiritual activities are also called paramesthyam. So when we hear about Narada Muni's discussion of the life of King Parsanabhati, it's educational. And we learn two things: what we should do and what we should not do. That is real education. Simply knowing what we should do is not enough. We should learn by the example given in this allegory, of King Puranjan, what we should not do and what we should do. So therefore it says, the allegory of King Puranjana, described herein, according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. Okay, now this is real literature. You are understanding what happens of the transmigration of the soul and what it actually is. And then you can fully understand it by studying this narration of the allegory of King Puranjan. So this is real literature. You are learning something that is of utmost importance for your life and your success in this material nature, becoming free, liberated from material nature and going back to Godhead. So this is real literature. It's not, you have mundane literatures that teach you to stay in the material world. This is real literature that's teaching you how to get free of this material world and going back to Godhead. Okay, thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And be happy and be educated in Krishna consciousness, knowledge, not the junk knowledge of the material world and material schools and mundane life.
Hare Krishna, Harivilas Maharaj, Dandavat. I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, yesterday you had given us a homework about teachers in modern education, how it's degraded and the kids are learning, how to smoke, how to drink, and illicit sex and all that in school. So I was looking at Prabhupada's you had asked what Prabhupada had mentioned about that. So Prabhupada said, for learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In the modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without elevation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence
Okay, one
in
stop.
seminars. Yes, go ahead, Maharaj.
No, just 1 second. And
Yes.
then you'll continue. The
Yeah.
life and the behavior of a teacher is not taken into account by the parents of the child that's going to be put in under the tutelage of the teacher. The teacher might be a smoker, a drinker, a sex maniac, or whatever. You don't know who the teacher is and what their culture is, what the culture they're following. So it's a big mistake to blindly give your children to teachers in public schools or even private schools without having a discussion to understand what their culture is. And if they have a culture of sense gratification, then you shouldn't put your child in that school. Go ahead now. You can continue.
Yes, thanks, Ma. The principle of teaching by example is central to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada expected not just teachers at school to adhere to it to educate the children, but also all preachers to follow it to be effective in conveying Vedic truths to people in general. He asserted that this would benefit both the preacher and the congregation.
Okay, profound statement.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't want to have a mundane person teaching your kids. Why? Because a mundane person will only talk about mundane things. They'll not, by the way, you're not even allowed, even if you're a good teacher, you're not allowed to talk about religion in public schools. If a kid starts talking about religion, the teacher will stop him and say, well, we don't talk about these things in school. It happened to one of my kids. One of my kids, for some, I think it was some homework or something, she started talking about Krishna consciousness, and the teacher stopped her and said, we don't talk about these things in school. This is what you believe. You can believe whatever you want, but we don't talk about things like this in school. And then my daughter came back home and she was bewildered. She said, well, I'm talking about Krishna and they stopped me. So, yeah. And the teacher said, this is what you believe, but that's not part of what we're teaching. Okay. So thank you very much, my dear devotees. But I give you full liberty to speak about Krishna all day today and every day. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol. No one's going to stop you in Krishna consciousness to speak about Krishna. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Mantra ki jai.